Hola ustedes. Tell me if you've ever heard this song before.
We did it! We did it! We did it! Yay! Lo hicimos! We did it!
Lo hicimos. We did it. When Dora and her little sidekick Boot sing that song, they're using the preterite past tense form of the verb hacer. This form emos, this probably looks familiar to you, MOS. It's kind of like in the present tense from hacer, we do. This would be we do it. Lo is a direct object pronoun meaning it. It goes in front of the conjugated form of the verb. So we do it, past tense, we did it, lo hicimos. What y'all need to know is that there's two types of past tense in Spanish. You're going to need to learn them in the next 5, 6, 7 weeks, whatever's left of the semester. One's called preterite, the other's called imperfect. Dora sings her song with Boots in the preterite tense. That's what this is. Lo hicimos. We did it. Here's what the same verb hacer would look like in the imperfect tense. Lo hacíamos. Lo hacíamos. A little bit different. This meaning, in English, see, we would both say we did it. But in Spanish, there's two ways to say it. Lo hicimos and lo hacíamos. The imperfect tense implies perhaps repeated action. We used to do it. Whereas lo hicimos implies a completed action. It's done and over with. We did it. I want to look at with you right now the forms of the imperfect tense. They're extremely easy, you guys. I can teach them to you in about 5 minutes. Son muy fáciles. They're all on página 224 del capítulo 8. Basically, all imperfect tense is habas and ias. Say it with me. Habas and ias. AR verbs have aba endings. ER or IR verbs have ia endings. Let's look at the next example. So basically, AR verbs end with aba, abas, aba, habamos, haban. For example, an AR verb like hablar, which means to speak. If you want to say in the present tense, you may remember these. Hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablan. I speak, you speak, he, she, it speaks, we speak, y'all speak, they speak. Notice how in the imperfect tense, which is the past tense, I spoke, you spoke, etc. It's kind of similar here. There's no O ending. It's like you stick a, well, first of all, the first and third positions are identical. Like I spoke is the same way to say he spoke. Notice though that it ends with an S here in the second position, just like here. And notice in the nosotros form, it still ends with AMOS. It's just you got to put an extra aba in the middle. AN here, just like here. Alright, let's see if you can figure out how to use an AR verb like trabajar, which means to work, and use it in the imperfect tense, okay? It's an AR verb, so it's going to be an aba verb. So how would you say I used to work or I worked, past tense? Yeah, you take trabajar, you cut off the AR, and you add an aba. Say it, trabajaba. And we could continue to conjugate. You worked, trabajabas. Same down here, trabajaba, etc. Let's go to the next slide. ER and IR verbs are next. So AR verbs in the imperfect are aba verbs. IR verbs, are going to be ia. Ias, iamos, iam. Let's explain why there's accent marks on every one of these I's. There's 5 vowels in Spanish, just like English. Say them. A, E, I, O, U. Just remember this, you guys. You and I are weak. So those are the 2 weak vowels. In the phrase buenos dias, notice there's a weak U hanging around the strong E. That's why we get to say buenos as one syllable. Bue is one syllable and nos is a separate syllable. There's a weak I here hanging around next to a strong A. If there were no accent mark on the weak I, this word would be pronounced dias, one syllable, dias. When you take a weak vowel and you stress it with an accent mark, you artificially make the weak I a strong vowel. As a strong vowel, it can separate from the other strong vowel, because remember it was originally a weak vowel. So you separate it into a separate syllable. So instead of saying dias, we say dias. Okay? This pronunciation is what's going to happen in the imperfect tense with ia verbs. So here's how you would say, for example, comer, to eat. I ate. Not sure why it's conjugated like this here. Comía. You ate, comías. Excuse me. She ate would be comía, etc. I just want you to understand how this putting an accent mark on the I here makes it an extra syllable. For example, if there was no accent mark here, this would be pronounced comia, comia. But by putting the accent mark on the I, it creates an extra syllable, which is essentially now, excuse me, 3 syllables. Comia, comia. That's why the accent mark is so important, and I will take off lots of points if you don't put accent marks on the right vowel on these tests. Let's see if there's anything else to show you. Imperfect tense then is abas and ias. Let's do some practice. Comer is ER verb, so is it an aba or ia verb? It's an ia verb. Good. So you have your stem, com. If you want to say I used to eat, or you could even say I ate. In Spanish, what would you do here? You put a I with an accent mark. Whoa, that didn't work out right. Sorry about that. So so the regular ending here for an ER verb, it's an IA verb. In the imperfect tense would be comía, I used to eat. Hablar is an AR verb, so is it an ABA or ER verb? It's an ABA verb, so essentially you just add ABA right there. Levantarse, is it an AR, ER, IR verb? It's an AR verb. It happens to be reflexive, but don't let that distract you. This has a little reflexive say for self on the end here. When you conjugate a verb, you have to break off the reflexive pronoun and put it in front. If the subject is I, then it's me. So I get myself up in the morning. In the present tense would be me levanto. However, in the past tense, imperfect, we would say AR verb, me levantaba. Means I used to get up at a certain time. Let's try ponerse, like put on your clothes, ponerse la ropa. It's also reflexive, but once again, don't let the say distract you. Below that SE, we have a what? ER verb. So is it? Yeah, it's an IA verb like comer. So if you want to say I used to put on clothes, then you would say me ponía. If I could actually highlight that and copy it, then I would stick it there. But you got the idea. That would be translated as I used to put on, or I put on in the past tense. Very good. Some other time I'll help you with preterit verb forms. Those are actually a lot more to learn. But imperfect is very easy. It's called abas and ias. By the way, imperfect tense only has 3 irregular verbs to memorize. That means 3 verbs that don't work like they're supposed to. Let me show them to you now. There are 3 short little verbs in the imperfect tense. Ser, ir, and ver. Ser to be, ir to go, ver to see. So for ser, instead of it being an ia verb, it's got really weird form. I was would be era, eras, and I'm not going to conjugate the rest for you here, but it's in the book on page 220, whatever that page was. To go, iba, ibas, that's a little bit weird, and ver to see. It actually is an ei ending. The only thing that's weird about it is normally if you cut off the er, see, your stem would have just been the letter V, but they're keeping the V, the E, and then they're adding the ei. So this means I saw, you saw, etc. Keep conjugating. All right, again, that's the imperfect tense in a nutshell. The next thing you'll need to start looking at is the rules for how to decide when to use preterite versus imperfect. Muy bien, adiós.